So welcome everybody. Today's a special meeting of the group of uh, study groups of philosophy of music. Today we will speak in English because we have Mattin here with us. He wrote the book Social Dissonance, which we read from the meetings 87 to 92. So we met 7 times talking about the chapters of his book. And then we also read the Future Humanities academic magazine about his book with several articles. And also we read two articles from him, Anti-Copyright, Why Improvisation and Noise Run Against the Idea of Intellectual Property, and also Improvisation and Communization. Additionally, we read also Ray Brassier's Unfree Improvisation. So we'll make a discussion from these readings with the author. And what we will do is to freely ask questions and see where it goes. So I'll open for people to ask questions.
May I start? A very simple question. I would ask Mattin, how does he feel about the book now that some time has passed? How about do you think you would make some changes, or did your views change somehow in this time that the book has been published and you've been discussing it? Just very quick, like initial question about how do you feel about the book nowadays and the theses that are defended in it?
Well, I feel that, I think it has accelerated. The social dissonance are becoming even more increasingly extreme to the point that they're breaking apart, or that they are, or people are just uh, kind of living behind the bullshit. I'm just thinking when Trump invaded, kind of kidnapped Maduro with the attack that he did in Venezuela. It was no longer about democratic change or doing any it was about getting hold of the oil and trying to basically benefit from the situation. So I see that there is like a kind of breaking point of certain liberal ideas are kind of uh, no longer being able to sustain themselves, and people are even willing to just uh, throw them out of the window. And I think this has to do a lot with the war in Gaza and what Israel has been doing. And I think like the Overton window of what is acceptable has radically shifted to the right and to kind of levels of violence and that are quite extreme, So I think things have been shifting. I also see that the people, when I do the score, people feel much more fragile. One has to be a bit more careful. Um, people are much more on edge, and much likely to have anxiety. Maybe even to be in a room with other people in a social setting might be uh, mm, feel more challenging than before. Then I've been translating. I've been working on translating the book into German in an experimental kind of process. Like we're using AI to translate the book into German, and then we will have reading groups, and sometimes online, sometimes in person, and we will do the score. And then we started to open up, like at the end of the project, we did like a festival of social noise, and we had like a conversation with both students, teenage students, but also members of a workshop, of an art workshop that are patients in a psychiatric hospital. And so what we're doing, it's been a process of slowly opening up, but one key question that became apparent is the language, that the language is not helping for, there's many people who really relate to the issues once they are explained and understood. But the language of the score or the book is like quite complex and it's a bit kind of a limitation to reach the people who really might feel, they have the social dissonance. So that, I guess, produces another layer of dissonance or inability to actually be able to socialize the issues. Yeah, these are some of the things that I can say now.
Just asking this language issue. Are you thinking of making another version of the score, or like a guidebook or something for a small guidebook for social dissonance? And also on this subject, it's something that I already wanted to ask. It's about how did you edited the book? I mean, because it has philosophical ideas and they are given importance, like they are very important for the book. So from this, I think it gets this. This is a book, philosophy book. And I was thinking that when I read it, I wanted the score to come first, like because I was reading the book and I respected the order of reading. So the last thing I read was the score. So every time you talked about the score, I was like, oh, it's a mystery. The score, it's kind of a mystery. Of course, I could check at the end, but I was like, no, I'll respect the order. And then, so when I finished, I was like, maybe the score could come first, like an impression, a feeling. No, but maybe he opted to put it last, so that we could focus on the philosophical concepts and the philosophical discussion. And then after that, make this bridge between the practice and the concepts.
Yeah, this is a very, very good question, and I totally agree. It's just, I guess I was, it started from a PhD that I did with Ray Brazier, and my desire was to work with Ray. And so at the beginning, it was just like trying to work on the concept of alienation and, look into it. And in the middle of it, it became clear that I needed to have some kind of practice element to it. And so that, so then the score came in the process. But I totally agree. I totally agree that I think the score and the performance of the score is it always opens things up, and people can relate, from very directly with it without the need for the whole thing. So I think I just let it be in that way because that's how it came to be. But not in a reflective manner, but I think you're totally right. So whether to do something more manual, I'm thinking of doing something with the deep shit listening techniques that I've been developing out of the Pauline Oliveros kind of deep listening and sonic meditations, which are ways of finding or listening to the social dissonance. And that one I really thought of doing it much more accessible and, with tools and techniques. So another element that has been happening through this process is that I understand that the score is one technique that kind of open things up, but then there's the possibility to be much more precise and, like go into other kind of, using different tools in order to kind of explore more specifically what type of dissonance are we talking about. Or, also making diagrams, using examples. I also realized that everybody has examples who really relate, and there is like you ground it much more. The whole it stops being such a abstract concept, but like you ground it, and then you start to understand where these specific examples comes from. Regarding how the book came to be or the editing process, it was kind of very long. So it was 5 years of PhD, and there I had the score, I had the core of the ideas, but then it was through editing the book that much more. It became much more thorough, and in fact, the editing by Maya from Urbanomic really, really shaped it. Well, in fact, no. First, with Ray, we went through the whole content and gave me feedback. Then I worked with this feedback and other things that I thought they needed to be there, and then with Maya, with really. I mean, she's the best editor ever, So we just kind of worked through it. But it was another 5 years process. So 5 years of PhD, having the core and the score, and another 5 years of, getting into the shape of the book. But I also was in the middle of it, like, I had like a kind of, had like some kind of burnout or something. So things were kind of slow. But but it was a long process.
And did you have the score already written by the editing part, like after PhD?
Yeah, because that's what it got performed in Documenta.
Oh, okay.
So I worked, around 2016. It was kind of working it. Then just like they became the last version. So in 16 and 17, and the score got performed in Documenta 180 times. So the score was really, really, I mean, and all this is recorded online and put in archive on YouTube. So that's there. So the score, I had also a lot of experience with the score.
Yeah, and in Documenta, the score was already stabilized, or did you?
Yeah, it was just one. Yeah, it was just one.
So you first you were doing PhD, and then you did the score, and then you started performing.
Yeah, exactly. I did one preliminary version in Berlin. But it was bigger, it was longer, it was just like, and then, in Documenta is when it got like, okay. Yeah.
Because it's very abstract and broad, the score, right?
But
okay. So
it's
just when you start doing, you already had these those modes. The modes were already like I remember the modes in Portuguese, but like
techniques,
palestrinha, lecture.
Like that was great. Like I don't know how. See, devices, maybe devices, techniques, or
the devices.
The devices.
You already thought the devices.
The devices come from a long time. It's like they come from when I started to work more with the audience and with other people, and like using language, and kind of already at the end of the 2000s, and like around 2000, and so the techniques emerged from 8, 9, 10, the human sampler, 7, 6, so they already, come from when I was starting to work with improvisation in a more conceptual way. So, for example, the human sampler, just picking up where people say, like just those techniques come from very early on, and then they just been accumulating, but that's come from different concerts. So this is like a culmination, the social dissonance is like a kind of culmination in which the audience, the music or the sound, it's just like start to lose a bit relevance, or there is not so much on the foreground. Then it's of the social relations and the noise in the social relations that is just like, okay, here it is. Let's explore this.
Yeah, this
So the development through the years.
Yeah, you cover this a little bit in the book. This is very interesting, the fact that you think of this as, in a sense, a continuation, or there's a rupture, of course, with the ideology of improvisation. You mentioned that a lot in the book because there's a certain you mentioned situationism and certain ideological kind of understandings of improvisation that you are you listening? Okay.
JP, can you try to stop I cannot hear you well.
Okay. Let me
JP,
see. Okay.
I cannot hear you well, so maybe take away the camera. See if it
Oh,
works
okay.
better.
Okay. No, is that better? No.
Kind of. Just right.
Yeah. No, I was wondering because let me see. There's a message here. I was wondering because you cover this a little bit in the book, the history of the relationship between this and improvisation. And there's also a criticism of the ideology of improvisation in the book. So it's interesting to see that the book kind of, I mean, that was also in my article, in my paper about it, right? Like I tried to think of social dissonance of the procedure as somehow belonging to the history of the avant-garde in a sense. But at the same time, you are criticizing elements like, the ideology of John Cage and the situationist ideology, these kind of things. Um, so how do you see like social dissonance as still connected to improvisation? Is it connected to the tradition of musical improvisation, or is it just like improvisation in a much broader, it's just a different sense? Like how do you see like the relationship between what you're doing and the tradition of improvisation? Was that clear?
I mean, yes, absolutely, and that's the struggle that I have because I must say that for me, improvisation has been maybe the best thing that has happened in my life. It's a bit over the top, but it's been really, really important. And the kind of community and the type of people that I have met, and it's been extremely important, and I appreciate it very much. The kind of sociability that occurs in improvised music scenes and settings, and the welcoming character of many of the people, openness. So there's a lot that I'm really appreciative, but I'm just trying to think of improvisation like, in broader terms, exactly as you said, how it connects to broader issues and in respect to freedom and individual self-expression and the problematics of assuming this. So it's a bit like following ideas of the free improvisation, that Ray, that was part of this concert that we did in Arica. So it's like, taking into account that improvisation doesn't happen in a vacuum and that we are extremely conditioned, and how to incorporate that conditioning into the process of improvisation. And then, yes, I am trying at the moment, trying to combine the different forms of improvisation in which, radical practices of the avant-garde have been involved in it, but not only avant-garde, I'm thinking of psychoanalysis with free association, you cannot get more improv than that, So, and the surrealists explore it through automatic writing, a stream of consciousness, so it's like, then the situation is with the derive, so there is a long history of forms of improvisation, of Jacob L. Moreno with, the theater of spontaneity and psychodrama, so there's like, improvisation has been there in many different fields, and and but they reach the kind of the limits of what one can do, and that's that kind of critical perspective onto improvisation is what I'm trying or pretending to integrate. And now I'm with David Grundy, amazing poet, musician, and academic. We've been trying to work through how to incorporate this critical perspective. So we started to do a research project, Freedom and Improvisation, in which we both look at the history of how freedom has been understood within the improvisers. We are doing also interviews, and we've been doing also a workshop called Expanded Improvisation in Berlin, in which we try to improvise, but in a way combining these different forms of improvisation. So we might end up doing very different things each session. So for example, one session we started to play with the cup in our head, in the sense of like, when you improvise, you usually have like a kind of cup that tells you like, okay, this fits, this doesn't fit, this fits, so all the prejudice and how one kind of incorporates some aesthetic judgment or prejudices, all that, so it's a way of trying to, basically question the unsaid rules of improvisation, the informal rules, and actually put them on the table and how they relate to broader infrastructural questions or, systemic relations. Lucas? Yeah.
I have one
Hi.
question like related to this, I think, because I was like reading the book again this week, like some parts of the book, and something that I was like kept going back in my mind is that I was thinking the possibility of a kind of set of practice or a kind of ecosystem of like a ecosystem of social dissonance practice, because I was thinking like what practice can be complementary to the social dissonance score. So my question is maybe if you can talk about like the relation of social dissonance score with the environment in which is embedded, like how, if this environment can offer this kind of ecosystem of practice or if you have in your mind other practice that can be like complement practice to the social distance score, like not only having the same aims and the same effects, but I was thinking like this complementary side of the thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's when I'm continuing to develop kind of tools and techniques. So like social dissonance was like the kind of root this core. So it's like in a core to kind of open up and do things. But then I realized that, there is the need to go into different, use different techniques, different modes of being. So I'll give you an example. So I did a workshop recently, about a month ago, at the ICI in Berlin. And we did it before performing the score. And this workshop was, basically, I explained briefly, and in the most clear way that I could, what social dissonance meant. Then we did this kind of listening exercise in which everybody tried to think of an example of social dissonance. So they wrote it, we wrote this example. And then we brought all these examples together and made like 4 groups of, we thought that, like out of the different examples, we identified kind of connections and made 4 groups. And then each group work on diagrams to try to kind of show the relations, how do they come to be, So that's kind of a way of thinking together, on how things relate to each other. The other one is this deep sheet listening, in which, people listen to their own, like usually the thoughts that the negative thoughts that they will leave behind in a meditation setting. So just to leave all the kind of anxieties, problems, those thoughts that produce stress, to give them room and a space. But I also give a technique, and then I've been learning the hard way, not the hard way, but through experience, like, for example, that, for people who have trauma, this is not great. So, in fact, in one session, one of student gave this technique of metacognitive therapy, which I thought it was brilliant. I don't know if any of you know metacognitive therapy, but basically it's a form of therapy in which it's not about dealing with the content of thoughts, but how you relate to those thoughts. It's kind of training in thinking, how to, in how to deal with your thoughts. So, for example, there is this technique of the volume, So do you use a volume, or a mixer? It's like mixing your thoughts, But basically, when I do the deep sheet listening, I say to everybody, you have this volume control, just turn it up and down, And if you have anxiety, it's better maybe just bring it down, And if you have any trauma, don't go beyond 5, in the volume. So these are kind of forms of technique that I'm seeing how allows ones, on the one hand, to try to better deal with effects of social dissonance, and then through this and the way that we relate to thought and to the anxieties they produce. So things have becoming quite clear, so there is like this. Many of us have this all or nothing type of mentality in which, if it's bad, everything is bad. If it's good, just can be relaxed. So there is like kind of sharing. How do we relate to this social dissonance at the mental level, and how do we find tools and techniques to better deal with it? So on the one hand is externalization, on the other hand is to try to find, tools, techniques, or ways to deal with that social dissonance. So it's like that kind of both. So those are, some of the issues. And then with JP, we've been talking for quite a while, and he has a very powerful critique, in the sense that so far social dissonance has been performed within the artistic and musical context. But the issues that it brings to the table, they are political in themselves. So how to, it's like limiting, are they like dealing with these issues in only this context? It allows for a limited amount of commitment. So the idea will be how to open up, how to basically politically organize this social dissonance. And this is something that I've been thinking very seriously, and I would love to find the kind of form of organization that will allow for this to happen. I'm thinking, and it's, and I guess the circle of ideas and ideology, or ideology and ideas, or the
circle of studies of idea and ideology. Yeah.
Yeah, I always get it wrong. So this has been a very But it's been a very inspiring example of how this could be happening. But so there is many ways in which this can be, it's expanded, and I'm still thinking about it. And not only that, then I have all the 180 videos from Documenta, which is a really amazing material to be working with and to decipher, and especially this moment at the height of globalization, where, then globalization now, we are seeing it's not happening at that level, So there's, yeah, I mean, I see, engaging with these issues for the rest of my life, basically, in different ways. And hopefully trying to find, more precise ways of dealing with them, because there is plenty of it. Yeah, it's like everybody's just full of social dissonance, and in some parts more than others, but, it's like, it's just, growing and growing and growing. So.
Yeah, I was thinking like even like related to the JP Caron like text in response, because I think like this kind of the possibility of this kind of set of practice, and not only artistic practice but also maybe political practice, and how to create this kind of like a set or ecosystem of practice. But
yeah, absolutely. Like I also did like this summer course a couple of years ago in when I was teaching in Gothenburg in Balland, and it was listen to your confusion, and we did like different ways, different exercises, but like then it was also going out and trying to find out why how I guess how reality reproduces itself, and it allows certain form of reproduction and others not, or what type of behavior they allow to occur, and it's just extreme. Like, so the students were in Sweden, and it's like from the visual language to the way people move in the streets, the way the very limited way that you're supposed to behave in a shop. If you don't do, if you're there just spending time, things becomes weird. To the art school, in the art school that I'm teaching now, it's like the students have in their head this absolute need to produce, and if they're not producing something, they have guilt, shame. It's like where are these thoughts and feelings coming from? Like, why do we accept them, even though they're making us feel like shit, like they're making us sick.
Anybody else? I just don't want to monopolize the floor. Sai daqui. Cats are annoying today. No, can you hear me okay, Mattin? I kind of try to solve the...
Yes,
Is okay? Okay.
yes, I can hear you.
Okay. No, I think that was a good, interesting answer, because you brought in the problem of freedom. So I think the problem of freedom is one of the central issues of the book. And with it, there's also the problem of the individual. So until now, like we've been in this discussion kind of stressing, I would say, a certain kind of therapeutic value of social dissonance. But does this therapeutic value goes as far as questioning the role of the individual, or do you think it still stays within the confines of maybe the well-being of the individual within this, very dire situation we are in? Like, because one of the promises, one of the very interesting promises of the book is this kind of questioning of the individual as the form of the subject, because there's also alienation from above. So alienation from above comes in and kind of imposes this, at least this is one of the theses of the book, ends up imposing this form of the individual in a sense. And there's been a bunch of critiques of therapy in a sense from Marxist milieus and anarchist milieus, in the sense that maybe therapy ends up being a form of, I don't know, to conserve the form of the individual instead of questioning the form of the individual. So it seems like there is a set of issues where you have to also position yourself within that kind of problem space, let us say.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully the idea is to externalize. It's like this like through these exercises, it's like externalizing and to try to understand precisely the relationship between the effects that alienation from above have on alienation from below, and how you relate, to each other. So it's like opening up, from the most kind of from how we deal with our inner thoughts to broader infrastructural questions, and like structural questions. So it's like that's why the diagrams. That's why like the talking. That's like the I mean. It's not. It's not just. It doesn't end into the. It doesn't have like a. It doesn't give you a solution. It's not a solution. It's just like at least the opening up and sharing and being together in a room allows for some kind of conversations, forms of interaction, and sometimes what people have said to me is that suddenly I had a language. This gave me a language for something that I felt, but I didn't express it. So that's from there. Then you can build up and do like, okay, what do we do about this? So it's like hopefully building up. But it's certainly not an end in itself or to stop. It's the idea is to constantly try to find the most powerful, developed, complex ways in understanding these relationships. So it's like it's constantly trying to understand how they work within each other. But so far, I of the political kind of organizations, in the ultra left that I've seen, it's like things can get so nasty so quickly, in terms of personal issues, and like really, so one has to be careful on how to address these issues in a political setting where the dynamics are not like they can be toxic, so how to develop a sensibility which allows for the questioning and opening up of what subjectivity is, what we are, the specific struggles that we are having, to then able to connect them to broader struggles. Yeah, so that will be the kind of objective of this project, basically.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that happened when I was a subject of the social distance in São Paulo, as you know, like we were there together. Lucca was there too. Maybe he has something to add. But one of the interesting effects that I thought was kind of promising was that at some point I had the impression that how to say that, performing a role as JP, not in the social dissonance necessarily, not as a role like I was designed like to have a role, but the role as JP Caron is a role. That there was like this strange kind of disconnection between what I feel is like my, public social persona, and what let us say this center of coordination of decisions is doing, in a sense. So there's like a certain gap that is felt at some point. That was like, I think, one of the very promising, I think, effects of the actual workshop we did in São Paulo. And the thing that is kind of bugging me a little bit about all of this is like how to actually kind of make these kinds of effects to endure in a sense beyond the workshop. So I think that connects to your question about organization and stuff like that. Like the CSII was kind of a way. It didn't produce that kind of very powerful kind of psychological effect, but it produced some kind of doubt because as I'm not sure everybody knows here in the I think yes because it's described in the paper that we read the one I wrote about Mattin. Uh, there was this kind of protocols and sometimes we have this like estrangement effect and as a collective. So it's kind of different in the social dissonance. I feel I had like the estrangement effect as an individual, let us say, and then in the CSII, we had like this estrangement effect as a collective. Like, is this what we want what we are doing as a collective? And also another interesting kind of issue that connects to what you're saying is that the CSII was actually started because of these kind of super egoic elements in the militancy. So everybody that came into the CSII, they were interested in like examining militancy as such, in a sense. So it was like a militant group destined to examine what militancy is and what kind of repression and discipline. Discipline can be here, can have like a good and a bad sense. This, what kind of discipline is the discipline of militancy in traditional political groups? So in a sense, it's this is why I brought them together in a sense, and but the way I see it, like one of the very interesting effects of social distance is that kind of, let us say, depersonalization, but it's a controlled depersonalization. It's not like the kind of pathological depersonalization we get when we are not in like in a controlled situation. But I wonder what kind of organizational structures would make it would enable one to develop these kind of controlled depersonalization type, like to experiment oneself not as an individual, let us say, which would be like maybe it would have like a lasting effect and an interesting political effect in the long run. Not sure about that, but maybe it's a possibility, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess there are examples, but I'm thinking of the consciousness raising group, feminist groups, in the 60s and 70s, that they developed these techniques to serve, from the personal to then the political, and they had some rules, they had some continuity. Um, Here, there is a experiential, and here maybe it goes a bit deeper. By deeper, I don't mean deeper in the, I guess I mean, it's like of trying to go into, from our thoughts and self-conception. I mean, I found it very interesting what you said, that in the CSSI, it's like organization that is like have this critical relation about what militancy is, And I guess for me, I was thinking of, okay, this social dissonance project or the freedom and improvisation project that we're doing is also like, it's like uh, a project about improvisation in which, or freedom in which these notions are critically, so these are kind of, I don't know if meta, but it's like, okay, we don't take anything for granted in the sense of how we are constituted. This needs to be put into the grinder of questioning and improvisation somehow. And how to build this, what kind of a structure will it have? Certainly, this requires time. It requires commitment. But I'm totally invested in trying something out. Like, I mean, one, it's like sometimes I come, with JP, I was thinking of suggesting, okay, let's do this, the international dissonance, or, like something like picking up on historical examples and then start to kind of experiment and try things out, I mean, I've been editing in the last 12 years this book that just came out last week, Abolishing Capitalist Totality, What is to be Done Under Real Consumption. There were many debates in the French ultra-left, and there were many groups that were, splitting, all the time, like the situation is, but there were many, many of them. But there was a paper, like, a kind of councilist, total non-Leninist, non-avant-gardist kind of paper called ICO, Información de Correspondance Obrère. How do you pronounce it, JP? Información
Correspondance.
Correspondance obrère. Obrère, like a worker, like a
Ouvrière. Ouvrière.
Okay.
Correspondance.
In Portuguese, I think it's operaísmo, right?
Okay, it's
Something like this.
It can be, but it's like a French. But basically, this paper, which was founded, among others, I think, by Henry Simon, who was part of Socialism in Bavaria, and the idea was to basically just report from struggles. So it made it very, very anti-sectarian, so people from different traditions, they could come here and share, kind of so it had like a kind of minimal point in common, some minimal points in common that then will allow for a very kind of heterodox groups of people to come together and share things, and I found that very inspiring, was the minimal points in common that we can share and what kind of minimal rules for respect and, so this kind of personal ego trips, don't develop, and that that there can be some lasting, understanding that the social dissonance is hard on us, like let's not produce it in the organization somehow, or let's be conscious about them, let's just deal with it. Stay with the confusion, but not be an asshole, kind of thing. So, yeah, but I think this discussion is really helpful to try to think for me about this, the kind of political dimension or the possible organization that could come out of this research or this way of dealing with these issues.
I think this is very interesting because it's like opening up before building up, right? So you have to first externalize, but this is a good stage before like tackling as usual, because tackling as usual leads to several kinds of problems, as you put.
Yeah, I have a question. Hello, Mattin. Good morning, everybody. So I kind of wrote my question. I'm gonna try to. It's better for me to go straight into the point. But
can I ask you just to talk a little bit louder, Ivan? It's kind of soft, your volume. Yeah. Or even talk louder.
It's okay. I'm gonna talk louder. It's better. So your performance uses the audience, as you say in the book, as an instrument. So what clears establishes a condition of participation of the spectator. And we can see that since the mid-60s, the audience participation has almost become a tradition in contemporary art. And some of this this perspective of the participation, and I could remember the relational aesthetics of the Nicolas Bourriaud, tend to emphasize a kind of a dissolution between art and life, often at the expense of the negativity of art in favor of the production of social relations within the horizon of the present.
but your piece for me seems to operate in a more tense way within this field. Uh, it it uses audience participation, but at the same time seems to resist this conciliatory fusion between art and life through this mechanism of dissonance. And I would like to hear more about how do you understand the idea of participation in the context of your work?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ivan. Um, yeah, I mean, it comes from, yeah, if we think of music, I was thinking of, like for me, it was very, very important the reduction of improvised music. So in the early 2000s, there was this scene like ultra minimal in different places, like in Japan with the onkyo scene, like really, really minimal, or in Vienna, Radu Malfatti, or the reductionism in Berlin. So it was like, to the point that Taku Sugimoto will only play one note in an hour, a guitar note, So there was like, so then the contest became extremely, extremely important. I guess similar to what happened in minimalism in art. If you think of the Dump Live in, light stream, them, if it was a group exhibition, obviously that light shaped the whole context. But but in the concert situation, then when you put that into the foreground of, I'm not interested in form per se. I'm not interested in the silence per se. I'm interested in the reality of it or the social relations that occurred within it. And then I started to kind of work conceptually and record the audience and then play it back, or like kind of find ways of opening up the improvisation not only from me and the instrument but the whole situation, so the unexpected could happen, kind of thing. And then slowly I realized that within the audience there was like this material that because I was, I guess, working a lot with dense atmospheres, like dealing with the tension that something produces between expectations, projections. In fact, a friend mentioned like, "Oh, you are like an sculptor." It was such a dense atmosphere within when I did something, and then it was like this density, and then it's like trying to understand where does this density come from, and then it's like, aha, so there is like these contradictions between the expectations and the projections, and between what one think is happening and what others are thinking of happening. And then there is something that it produces, it's like, it's some kind of material that maybe you cannot see it, but you can perceive it very much. It's like really a thick, it thicks, and this is extremely interesting, like phenomenologically, where is this happening, But basically that became the kind of material that I was interested in, that these densities, and these densities have, they come from this, yeah, dissonance or forms of negativity that have to do with unexpected projections of what is happening, um, confusion, misunderstandings, like feeling insecure, feeling embarrassed, all these things that have to do whenever you are in a social setting, which is a bit unfamiliar. Then all this comes into the surface and clearly expose our social character, that, we are always in relationship to each other, and how we project how people think of us, and, like how we project ourselves, so all this kind of material that is complex, and and I wanted to do that, I wanted to deal, smooth out by any means. That was my noise. These densities of contradictions in different ways. From expectations, from projections, from doubts, from confusion. That's what I was interested in exploring. So then it becomes quite subtle. Then in the sense, this participatory kind of ideas is not about conveying something, a specific idea, conveying a certain way of being in the room, or giving it a positive input. It's about dealing with the complexity of these dense atmospheres, and that's not so. There's not much. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm here. I'm not claiming any originality or anything. But this is the So it's a. I mean, a friend put it very clearly. My friend Anthony Alves, who edited the book Noise and Capitalism, but also this abolishing capitalist totality. And it's like said, look, I'm interested in bringing social realism into improvisation. And then he claimed, well, them is anti-social realism because we live in anti-social reality, So that's what I'm interested in exploring. That kind of anti-sociality, even though we constantly try to justify and find ways of doing we can be nice to each other and everything, but we know that in general, this reality and this system that we live in is absolutely antisocial.
I have a question that kind of
Thank you.
connects to that. That's kind of has something to do with the practice. This practice of anti-sociality in a sense. The way you usually guide the social dissonance workshop is very gentle. Like the way we see in São Paulo, it was very gentle, very nice. But sometimes it's more confrontational, isn't it? Like, how do you square the fact that, I mean, to produce sometimes the dissonance, you have to be confrontational. And by doing that, you are actually enacting the dissonance in a certain sense. Like, is there a difference between a representational element, like you are representing something there, I don't know, as you say, sculpting a situation, and in good English, you are the difference between that and like being a jerk somehow, like sometimes you have to be a jerk to maybe sculpt the situation. And this is something that this is something that I talked with Ray many years ago. I didn't even haven't met you. He said like, yeah, what I like about Mattin is that he's a very sweet guy, but because of his practice, he has to be a jerk sometimes, and this makes me respect him that he forces himself into this jerk role because it's sometimes necessary to kind of be able to incite the audience and make things happen. And there's a few examples of that. Like there's the performance with the feedback noise from the microphones. I think that was one example. There was an example. There was the Diego Chamy. I always love that video. Diego Chamy interviewing before Karkovsky, and he's giving you pieces of Karkovsky's text, and you're saying like this is all shit and stuff like that. Like people are smiling because they know the video. Like this is a classic. So I don't know. Like there is a practice. It boils down to the following. There is a practice of knowing how to be a jerk without being a jerk. Like without actually being a jerk. Like this is kind of delicate thing, right? Is kind of hard to do in a sense to enact this. Or is it like, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess that maybe it's a big shift that has occurred, but kind of. I came from the punk and the noise scene, and I love the kind of, trying to shake things up, so I love the kind of compression, I enjoy the tension that it produces, something, like I don't know, I mean, now I'm been going for over 2 years to psychoanalysis, so there was like maybe something there that need to come out in different ways, and it's like, like yeah, in my practice is where things, just like that kind of dark, negative kind of elements, they come into. I guess I socialize them through my practice in some ways, but like the noise really allowed me that to do it in different ways. Sometimes more aggressive, sometimes more playful, But then I realized that there is not the darkness is like in different ways. It's just there. You just need to do like some subtle things, and things can really turn. It's like you don't need much to go into try to. I guess just like as we said, like how do you say aspect? Like to what's aspero, like when a surface
It's the
is like
same.
really rough,
I think we get the
to
idea.
roughen the surface of reality, to kind of like we usually try to cover it, just to get by. It's just like okay, let's allow the roughness of reality to to experience for a bit. So and then at the beginning when we were starting the first sessions of social dissonance in Documenta, we really were like, it was like live trolling, It was not live acting role playing, it was like live trolling, like really very small things. And then the situation starts to go by itself and the dissonance appears, you don't need much, you really don't need to be a jerk for the dissonance to appear. And also, I think people's buffer is much more limited these days. It's not necessary to, it's not the life is a jerk enough. That you just, look at Trump. Is there somebody who is more jerk than Trump, and he's like the most powerful person in the world. So I think that level of jerkiness is quite, it's already quite okay. It's like,
Yeah.
and I think. Yeah, so there are different ways to kind of bring things to the table that they don't necessarily need to be obviously jerked, Yeah.
Yeah, because there's also this tradition that I know you mentioned, like coming from noise and punk and industrial music. There's this tradition of kind of attacking the audience somehow, in a sense. So I feel that there's something to that in social dissonance, but yeah, it's refined in a different direction, of course. Yeah. Gabriel.
Hey, I'm dealing with some technical problems here. Hi, Mattin.
Hi.
So my notebook just stopped working, so I had to join in from my cell phone. So I'll struggle a bit. I'll try to get my engage with noise matching because I know you are in the noise research unit, right? And the whole section on social dissonance about noise engages in this conceptual reframing of noise, and you quote Malaspina a lot, right? Which is also in the group. And from what I got, noise here is seen as this force that is capable to create a crisis in a system, and it forces it to reorganize, right, at a more complex level. And it is quite fundamental in the sense that it creates tension in Malaspina words, in the concept of information, right, and that allows for the system to complexify itself and evolve in some ways. So I would really like to know how, if we're still thinking about the function of noise nowadays in these terms, or if you guys have come up with any more details or any additions to this whole section of noise.
Yeah, I guess we continue the conversations. I guess that it has to do with the level of how much entropy do we allow into ourselves or not. And I think this is, I guess, what we've been looking at it is in the broader kind of political perspective, but also at the level of the individual, like how people close themselves, because they don't want to deal with confusion, they don't want to deal with opaqueness, they don't want to deal with anything that is like people are so saturated by the information, that they just want. I say it very often in conversation with the students that they, it's like overwhelming. It's this kind of overwhelming, which makes it, like we have this diagram of the porcupine, that kind of opens itself the spines, the pines to kind of counter any form of contingency. But this only produces more and more contingency. But so it's like we've been talking about this, how to get this balance between allowing some noise in, but not, that you don't then kind of saturate yourself, So it's like, I think this relationship between noise and ourselves is extremely, we're dealing with it in different ways. Like, so for example, Miguel Prado, who is also part of the group, he has written an interesting text on entropic modernity, like how now in today's reality, there is like all these feedback loops of entropic processes that nobody controls, that is like they amplify themselves and they becomes more and more and more fragmented, So how to navigate this entropic reality that it's just like chaos that, like they don't make any sense whatsoever. But nevertheless, we need to deal with it. And this is like just increasing, it's constantly increasing. But then, the far right capitalizes on this by just giving you extremely simple, clear ideas of what the nation should be, gender, family, so just in naturalizing these complex notions and giving you a very problematic sense of belonging you, or they offer you this, which is just kind of fucked up. But we understand very well that how it works, and that's we did when we did this festival of social dissonance in Langenhagen, which is like a suburb in the north of Hanover. We had like a stand of a social dissonance stand in the middle of a market, Saturday market. We're trying to speak with people about social dissonance, and people had what Klaus Tebeleit called the corporate panzer, which is like the armored body or the tank body, that they were so enclosed. They didn't want anything that it was a bit outside of their, they just wanted, so it was only people who were like, either people from other places or people who, who realized how this is becoming, antisocial, but then on the other hand, there were a group, like a stand for the AfD, the far-right party, and there they were, like, I don't know, 9 people, super prepared. They had like people for, they knew what to say, they knew how to convince you. They had the flyers. They had like everything like super ready there to go. We did like a research interview, and they just had answers for everything. Not very good, but they just like they're there. They understand that is their time, and they're seizing it. They're going for it, which is for the right is kind of okay because they can just simplify things to the core and offer something. If what you promote is like, okay, let's just stay with the confusion, let's just stay with the noise. In this entropic modern reality is like not so appealing. It's so we're dealing with noise in these different ways, kind of applying it more in broader societal, but also psychological terms, talking about it and dealing with it. But yeah, I strongly recommend this text by Miguel Prado on entropic modernity. It's on some, like with the CSI, yeah, to the long text by the Circle Studies of Ideology and Ideas.
Idea and ideology.
Circle
Circle of
Studies
Studies of Idea and Ideology. Yeah.
I think I got it now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, in the video description after, I will try to cover these links and references on the description.
Great.
Do you want to comment anything, Gabriel? No, of course.
Yeah, I was aware of the entropic modernity text. I skimmed it, but I haven't read it. It is quite a long text, and I really like that it engages with the political movements. Right, it talks about accelerationism, and it makes this shift towards the noise conceptual schemes. Right, so I'm looking forward to it now that you recommend it.
And I think maybe this is a friendly critique that I still haven't said to Miguel, but he's on the left. I guess it's maybe he has a certain left in mind, but this characterization of the left as that can offer a kind of sound future, or that there is some kind of telos to history. That's certainly, yeah, Marx was definitely not thinking, and I think that's a very rough characterization that people have done, and I think he was very, very careful, especially after the German ideology, to not give you some kind of false hopes, or I mean, the idea of historical materialism is that it's to our social reproduction or practice that we generate the reality, and it's the conceptions and the ideas that it kind of produces. So I think that is maybe a problematic characterization of how he frames the left, and maybe there are more possible or interesting readings of that, and those I think are the ones that need to be activated or discussed. More critical ones that don't have this kind of teleological understanding of history.
Just to know, the Social Dissonance Festival you mentioned, what was it exactly? Like you said, you made conversations about the book or workshops, and
Lately, like you mean recently?
no,
Or
you mentioned Social Dissonance Festival.
it was a social dissonance festival. Yeah, a social noise festival
Social
that we
noise.
did. Yeah, it was like after we ended up with the kind of that's almost ended up. We had a session because you have to translate it into Portuguese, the book. Yeah, basically, I'm saying this because the English version is missing a text that Cecil Malaspina wrote for the Spanish
Right.
version.
Spanish version, yeah. There's a text by Cecilia. I'll have the Spanish version. Yeah.
And then we had it in German, so we're gonna have it in German. So yeah. So if you do the Portuguese version, you will get the text by Cecile. But so basically we were doing the translation of the German version, which we will incorporate in the reading group. And the idea is that we will incorporate the comments, and like we were situating it the discussions within Germany in Langenhagen and Germany, last year, which is like the level of social dissonance is just extreme. And then at the end we had this festival, and it was great because it was like finally kind of opening up, because many people were asking me like, are you not gonna opening up to do this, in outside the artistic or the musical realm? It's like, I think if the language was a bit easier, and everybody can relate to these ideas, it's not that there is there, people can really relate, it's like, if we understand social dissonance as the contradiction that exists between ourselves as subject of capital, but the illusion or belief of that we are made to believe that we are subjects for ourselves, like this contradiction it manifests to everybody, I think, in different ways, in different degrees, but it's there. But then, so then we did this festival and things, it was like trying to open it up, it's very, very slowly. It was like maybe a first attempt to do. And we were gonna continue to work with these, patients from the psychiatric hospital who are part of this workshop, and then we will do a second edition. There will be a festival of social noise in Hanover, happening this September.
Okay. Yeah, because when we were reading the book, we were asking ourselves how this opening up could be done, but also we were thinking. But of course, Mattin is writing from a philosophy, activist background, artist, musician from improvisation. So he has to do stuff first in musical improvisation, and then when he does stuff that's not free improvisation, musical improvisation anymore, he goes to like documenta or art stuff because his background is in it. But then how does it expand? So you're already doing this stage like of expansion, I think.
But very, very slowly and very humble, it's just like very, very little, like just
because also sorry, but because in the discussions, like João Paulo, who was not able to be here today, asked if it was easier for people from the arts because of these because of what Ivan said, like people from the arts are more used to be exposed in a participatory situation, maybe. So he asked that, and maybe you already answered, like you saying that actually it's more open than this, but you can like talk about that. And he also asked if we could understand social dissonance in the like aesthetic education, is it like a like aesthetic education, like teaching people about how to feel, how to see the world.
What, like Schiller stuff?
Kind of like Schiller stuff, like in one of our discussions.
Yeah.
Thinking of it, maybe it's because of this like trajectory inside the arts, but from what you're answering, maybe it's another thing.
I think I'm closer to Paulo Freire, so it's like I think or that's the objective, or that's the idea, like kind of trying for people to understand concretely, like the examples, then how to scale up with the to the structural kind of dimension of the the struggles that happen in this micro moment to the broader kind of perspectives. And then, in fact, we didn't do this core, but with these people from the psychiatric hospital, they really got the social dissonance, obviously, and we did something that was really interesting, like writing examples, and then we did a karaoke in the middle of a park. one of the most amazing experience I think of my life. Basically, some of us we recorded videos of giving an example of social dissonance. So we had the text, and then there was like a sampler and a microphone. And so the lyrics were examples of our social dissonance, not written as a poet or anything. But then one person will start singing in whatever way, and then the music will be quite like with the sampler and the computer, just like improvised music. So it was just amazing. And then, these people from the workshop of the psychiatric hospital, they were, yeah, we all enjoyed very much. It was a very surreal type of situation. People in the park like passing by, and then we were doing this very, very weird kind of surreal noise, but very grounded in specific experiences. So socializing this social dissonance through the karaoke, it was a very good way of using aesthetic means, but to deal with something that is definitely has to do with everyday reality. So it's kind of just taking what you can from the aesthetic realm and what it allows you to do, and maybe to be playful. Yeah, like I kind of try to be playful, but yeah.
But do you think I have to be more prepared, like like in art situations, it's more easily done than these other situations?
I mean, as I said, it's a very yeah, but also in the art, depending on the city, people are quite reaction. Like they have a difficulty with, not everybody kind of. Not everybody. Yeah, no, it shifts quite a lot. Then it also depends whether it's a bar or what kind of setting it is. It's alternative space, it's not. It's people know each other or they don't know each other. So it's like this other the familiarity of people with the space. But then I can say that it's much. Like I definitely had experiences of. Yeah, the South America tour was really amazing. Like for example, Argentina is like they live with, it's like it's like their home. It's like they start talking. It's just like they really. Sao Paulo was amazing because it's like super sophisticated group of people and super engaged. And then in Lima there was a level of violence that I never seen in other place. It was a level of like inner tension. That it was so. Yeah, those were kind of clear examples of places rather than context.
Yeah,
That shaped
I
how
would say
things.
I would say maybe the art. I mean, the question about the art milieu is that maybe they are more. The idea is like, if I understand correctly, what Iwao is saying, like, is they are more prepared for this kind of breaking of normativity because, in a sense, the art milieu is about this break. So we already expect some kind of novelty, some kind of breaking of expectations, and things like that. But at the same time, like I was teaching a class at the new center, and there's this student, Lynn Korobkova. Not sure you know who that person is. She's a composer in Berlin, and she mentioned she attended to a social dissonance in Berlin, and people were just waiting for something to happen. Also because it was in an art space, and she said like, yeah, they were all very sophisticated people from art waiting for some art to happen. So in a sense, it's a double-edged thing. In a sense, it seems like the art people are supposedly more open than the non-art people, but at the same time, the art situation has its own ground rules, and in a sense, maybe they expect art to happen. And this connects to another question. For instance, in São Paulo, it was very different for me to experience the performance the first day and the workshop the second day. The performance was like a performance of, in a sense, like participatory noise and things like that. But the problem with the performance is that it gets aestheticized and people think it's like music or something. And there's this kind of framing problem that I think is something that social dissonance has to deal with. Because depending on where it happens, it gets framed as A, B, or C types of stuff. Like here it is like an art situation, an art performance, and it can be judged as an art performance, which is in a sense a category mistake. In a sense, it is. Of course, you can think, it's not successful as art anyway, or something like that. But I mean, it's a category mistake because it's not supposed to be actually an art performance. And then the second day with the workshop, it's much more clear because you have much more time to explain and to get into the exercise and people understand what it is. But at the same time, some people might think it's like therapy. So it gets framed as a different thing. So I feel there's always this problem of framing what you are doing depending on where you are. And the frame can be helpful, but it can be also an encumbrance.
Absolutely.
Sometimes the framing just orients people to behave in a certain way, which is not conducive to a good result in terms of social dissonance itself. Something like that, I'll
I
say.
absolutely think I think you said there something quite important. Maybe just before I go into this, I comment about. I wonder whether it was the one that happened because I think I only done it twice in Berlin. Maybe it was the book opening like 3 years ago or 4 years ago, or it was like a week, a month, 3 weeks ago. When was this? When did the woman
No,
say
no, my
this?
my my class was last year, so it was way before that.
Okay. So it was really long time
I
ago.
think
But exactly,
that class was April or May last year, something like that. So
okay. But basically, yeah, precisely because in the art world, people are, and in Berlin, where people want to be cool, people are so self-conscious, that then the social dissonance becomes like extreme. And I think that's why, it's super interesting what you said there, about becoming very conscious of your performance of yourself as JP, like and all that, we all do that in some ways. Regarding the context, so it's like taking into account what this person said about like, oh, the social dissonance gives a language to something that is, feeling it but not articulating it. Maybe the problem is that there is no right, proper context for this social dissonance to, I come from the improvised music scene and I'm in this in between an art and I'm trying to do this, but yeah, certainly maybe the context is not, is limited and maybe it needs some, maybe this political organization or some way, like something, it lacks the, it lacks the organizational structure. If that, I don't know how to call it, what is it that it needs, but so maybe it's slowly developing a very rudimentarily a language and some techniques to deal with it, practically movement wise and listening wise and things like this, but it lacks a kind of framework in which the complexity could be developed, without having to be restricted or utilized or instrumentalized, like, where kind of long-term commitment could be developed. Yeah, so that, I mean, that would be amazing if that occurs, but I take this into account and I think it's part of the issue, I mean, I guess, like I'm very influenced by the race text, genre is obsolete. And I guess I'm fine and I'm kind of exploring what is to be in between these different fields, places. Yeah. But at the same time, it's also quite like, people get confused and like,
There's
it
a
might be like,
yeah. The way I understand it, I think there's also an effect of the alienation from above in this, because, for instance, the way I understand social dissonance, I mean, I tend to connect it like Henry Flint was in your class recently. I tend to connect to Flint's idea of constitutive dissociation. Somehow, social dissonance uses constitutive dissociations. Flint's definition is like you have a certain protocol, right? Like when you constitutively dissociates the protocol, it means you transform the protocol in such a way that the aims of the protocol are not the same as before, but you don't declare it. You're not declaring it now. Now we are doing this. You're not declaring. You just like go to an art situation and you don't get to see art. You see something else. You go to a political situation and you're not doing politics. You're doing something else because there's a disconnection between the active protocol and the aims of the situation. So I think social dissonance has something to do with it. It would be like an example for me of constitutive dissociation with a certain uh, domain, the domain being the subject under capitalism or something like that. But the problem is, I feel with the constitutive dissociation, even idea, and this reflects upon the reception of Flint's work even, is that anything that you do that constitutively dissociates, which means it is something, the aims of which means the utility is not clear. Almost anything that you do with that property ends up being art. It's not art before it, it's art after it. Just because it doesn't have like a usefulness, oh no, it must be art. So in a sense, the must be art kind of clause is a way to, for me, it's almost a way to neutralize the potency of what you're doing, because what's important is not being art. This is not but the being art, in a sense, neutralize the potency of what you're doing, because in our situation, this is why I say like it has something to do with the determination from above, is that in our society, anything that is not directly useful ends up
you're
being like
freezing,
art
JP.
or something like
I don't know
that,
if
right?
you're freezing. Maybe take away the camera.
Sorry, but I think I made myself clear enough.
You
Like
have
that was the
freezed.
point. Yeah.
JP?
Yeah.
He's
Are you
gone
listening
a
to me?
bit, but he'll be back.
What?
Yeah.
Hello? Am I not
You
coming
were
through?
away for the last 2 minutes or so.
Am I not coming through, or not, are you not listening? I'm seeing
Yeah,
everybody.
I mean,
No, the last like
we missed you
30,
like 2
40
minutes.
seconds.
Yeah.
2 minutes.
For you, it was more. No, I think it's less. It's less.
2
A bit
minutes is a
less.
lot. Like
Yeah.
you missed
You
everything.
can, yeah.
I mean, you were talking about the problem of, when constitutive dissociation makes its work, it ends up just being art and it gets
Yeah,
neutralized.
exactly. That's the issue. I think in a sense, this is an effect of the determination from above, because in our society, anything that is not directly useful becomes art. Not because it intends to be art from the beginning, from the get-go, just because no, we don't know what to do with it. So let us say it's art. So in a sense, for me, this neutralizes the effect of the dissociation or the social dissonance in a sense, or tends to neutralize this effect. This is a problem, and it has to do with this problem of framing, of categorizing what we are doing in a sense, like under what frame we understand what's being done. You don't want to declare the result of social dissonance, but at the same time, you have to almost negatively define what you're doing, par rapport art or therapy or other things that might, colonize this specific dissociation, right?
Yeah, and it connects to the discussion that we were having 2 weeks ago about the division of labor and the limitations and how the framing kind of like just like it can really render important, certain people or things or ways of doing, and I guess here it makes me think of, okay, how do we go from the alienation to below, from below, and scale up, towards the alienation from above, like kind of how to find those ways, which is, once again goes back to the organization. I don't know if organization is the right word, but it has to be, maybe organization, but like that's a kind of way of working together towards the transformation of reality. But with the comments that you, Enrique, you said, like opening up before, like scaling up, so how to do this is a key question. Is the key question, which, opening up before building up, as you said, which I think, how to generate this context. So there's a lot of work to be done.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Hello, I was at the São Paulo. Huh?
Yeah.
Nice to see you. Yeah, I think it's a bit of a follow-up from Caron's question, and it circles back to a lot of what was said already from Lucas and other questions. I think one of the questions that showed up from reading for me was this question about aestheticization or aesthetics and aesthesis, which you mentioned in the book, that this practice is a sort of way of denying the autonomy of this aesthetic domain, let's say, and of bringing it back to the social relations that constitute the aesthetic context, and which I think goes to this issue of how it is experienced and perceived and understood as practice or something else, etc. But the question I would have is a bit like the question about the relation with improvisation. It is what is what would be for you the artistic implications after social dissonance, let's say, not when it's over, of course, but after this diagnosis of the importance of social dissonance. How can the artistic practice in general, let's say, be reoriented? Because it seems in the book you mentioned, like, you come from improvisation and noise in this context and punk, etc., and you reach from those points, you reach this practice of social dissonance, that there is this piece, there is this core. To me, it seems to be there's the workshop and some constellation of practices that you do that are like deep shit listening and things that kind of, at least how I perceive it, somewhat, how to say, they are inside the social dissonance idea, let's say. But how do you view it? How it affects your practice beyond just this score, in the sense of, maybe it's a bit more concrete question also, like, did you, after reaching this point, did you keep improvising in free improvisation settings? Did you keep I know you have like the regular and other projects, more musical projects in some way. That is a bit my question, like, how do your practices that are not directly related to this, and practice that are perhaps more aesthetic, more musical in some way, I don't know, how did they change after this diagnosis, after this idea? And how do you think, more generally, beyond just your example, your case, how do you see this relation between okay, this proposal comes from free improvisation, for example, but how should free improvisation respond to this proposal, right? As in, not should everyone stop improvising and just perform the score? I think it's not what you would propose, but how could this field, which has this ideological limitations that I agree with and you identify, or experimental music in general, etc., this kind of aesthetic fields, artistic practices, musical practices, how could they respond from this diagnosis, and how did you personally, I think, deal with this relation between this practice you do about social dissonance and this score and etc., and other activities, and here talking about more musical and more artistic activities, not so much this question of how to transpose the barrier with politics or organization in general. I think more coming back to this aesthetic domain, let's say.
Yeah, thank you. Great question. And I've been struggling quite a bit because I would love to. Yeah, I would love to be back with improvising with friends and like playing and being part of that circuit, but I don't get many calls. Nobody wants to improvise with me. But anyway, maybe it's not that much. But I would love to. I'm trying to find, and through this expanded improvisation workshops with David Grundy, we have been trying to find ways. With these other bands, like with Al Carpenter and with, especially with Billy Bao. I guess Billy Bao has always had this also kind of interactive type of thing, and we did one great concert in Instance Xavier in Paris, where everybody at the end we were playing all together, and and there was a bit maybe a conversation, but also noise, mobile phones, just like, and at the end it was just like a kind of whole huge improv, the audience also taking the instruments, this is and then because of that concert, I think they invited us to Louvre Festival in Lausanne, and they wanted us, okay, yeah, what do you want? We heard about this, and we want to do something similar. And here it was like really okay. So from the get-go, start, there were several amps, drums, everything was there to kind of generate this, this noise, improv, collective improv, everybody together. This is much more kind of like a participatory noise concert, but in a it was really. I mean, in fact, it was the kind of music that I always wanted to do. It's just like everybody just there, going for it in different ways, and like being together in this massive noise, But this is more, like doing together, like. Which in these conditions, I guess a place also like Switzerland, where people are a bit more restrictive, this I think had a very okay, wow, okay, good, I think these days, and especially after that concert, Billy Bao concert at we call it La Commune de Billy Bao, but that might be the name of the next record. But you could see that people want, they want these cathartic collective experiences, and they start banging on a drum, like start just like together being in a room with other people, which on the one hand, you can just say like, oh, this is just participatory, nice kind of, but doing it maybe in a nice in a noise concert, or rock noise, or whatever you want to call it, that with that level of, the energy, and perhaps previously I had more problems with kind of this cathartic type of feeling, but these days, whatever gives you a bit of life, or whatever gives you a bit of, just like shaking things up and behaving a bit different, in an active way together with other people, it feels already super powerful. I mean, in fact, I still think that the concert situation is such a precious thing that we need to keep and work, because it's, a time where people, like take a risk, and give a bit of time. The times are not totally framed. There is this still loose conventions, it's like, it's not so fixed. Things could happen which are unexpected. And, maybe before we had taken for granted, but now when I think there are people who are scared to be in a social situation, we need these type of spaces, and we need to activate them and use them in different ways. I don't know if I'm conventional, because now participatory kind of things can become maybe part of a convention, but it's still, the getting back to the division of labor question, and then paying and receiving. There's still, it's not that we've got over certain roads or ways of doing things. But I would love to, because I've been in this in between, to be honest. Sometimes I've been doing more musical concerts, but I feel that the music is not cutting through. I've been trying to mix, with I was presenting this is the Means of Complexity record, like so, like this in between, having mics, like 5-6 mics in the room, so concert interaction, talking, playing together, not like trying this. So I've been trying to do different ways of dealing with it. I still haven't found, or I'm continuing to experiment and try things out, but it's not that I can tell you, I mean, the Billy Bao concert, I mean, if places or people or festivals, they allow us to have this massive amount of instruments and just like do this collective, kind of mayhem. I mean, it's just, but maybe like for Anea Lockwood, for the piano transplants, when she burned the pianos or put them on water, maybe they need to be instruments that are beyond repair, but like, just like this collective way of making together, that's, I mean, that's beautiful. And in fact, I was doing in the early 2010s, well, 2010 exactly, like doing these non-concerts, which was anonymous improvisations without instruments. And it was just basically people meeting in a room and, they're starting to do sounds or singing or nothing or talking, So it was a kind of preliminary. It was one of the seeds. There were several seeds for social dissonance, but like I love also the music of nothing, of just people in a room, like or like just clapping, just like all this super generic that for me is some of the most precious nice music that I can think of. This generic or audience feeling a bit uncomfortable and just like with the church. In fact, I had an idea for Francisco Lopez, which I still haven't. I had it for years now, but I still haven't decided. But I would like to do a collaboration with Francisco Lopez, in which we use, because I have quite a lot of field recordings of audience being uncomfortable and just like the sound of the room, or like and I would like to do a concert with him, like our record and a concert, but using this in between sounds of audience being uncomfortable, So in fact, there are different ways in which I've been dealing with this material and also using it as aesthetic or sound or musical, but how to now go back and reconcile and do things with the critique that I have already developed, and not falling into my own critique, this is a bit of a head fuck. And in fact, in the prologue and the preface that Ray, started with this, this quote. What is the thing to not be done? Like, no longer done, doing the, the cheesy thing of just like, and so, yeah, that quote has like, oh, wow, like, on the other hand, like talking to Cecile, she had a critique of this modernist male kind of critique of like breaking through and like, I don't know. But this has been a head fuck, to be honest. It's not, I don't have a good way to go about it. And it's still in this in between. And even the workshop that we're doing of expanded improvisation is it is interesting, but it's a kind of in a research phase. It's like feeling quite ambivalent or strange about it. But yeah, I mean, yeah. So it's not. I don't have a clear way forward within this question.
You can talk. You can answer before me, Lucca, if you want.
No, yeah, I think it's a super interesting question because it goes back to what was being talked about before of not only this ecology of socially dissonant practice, like Lucas was saying, but also about the devices and techniques of social dissonance, right? So there are more techniques of social dissonance than performing the social dissonance score. Or so, how can a improvisation performance in a concert setting activate social dissonance techniques or the social dissonance feeling, etc. So I think it's very easy to sort of map out or like do this sort of sketch of how these different practices can engage with social dissonance more generally, right? As I mean, everyone in everyday life already experiences, but what is the specificity of this practice in the way of engage? But, yeah,
He's back.
but
JP, the recording. Okay, right. So do you want to finish? Are you finished?
I am.
Okay. So I wanted to talk about it. Like Lucca question happened when we were reading, but and then kind of this question, and it's we are a group of readers, but that are interested in philosophy, of course, and in music. And many of us play music. Lucca plays free improvisation. Lucas also. I play a lot. Gabriel also. Like at least we play in free improvisation a lot. So we have this in common with you, that we are interested in philosophy and we play free improvisation. And so this question was interesting because also sometimes when we are doing more like writing or philosophy, we went into this fighting mode. Like we have to give arguments and we have to show like the reader that our discussion and our way of approaching is interesting, or and in a way sometimes like things got overstated because we want to like press the point, right? So I was curious also about this coming back to improvisation, because I wanted to know if how much you meant like the critiques on the improvisation you meant, and how much you meant, but it was overstated because in the book you were trying to like sell the idea of social dissonance, and because sometimes we we make these critiques, but it's like it's bad when we don't have them in mind. But then after we have them in mind, it's okay to come back because something has changed, and so some stuff we do we can like accommodate or think about, but it's okay to start doing again. So I was just thinking of that. You already.
I think it's a very good question because I guess I was trying to, it has a bit of positioning, even if it's critiquing the idea of the individual, very much so. But at the same time, there is a kind of contradiction in the sense that it's quite an individual, it's quite a peculiar, or and maybe I'm trying to mark myself or say, like position myself in opposition to, certain ways of understanding, improvisation and maybe doing characterizations to a certain extent, maybe rough characterizations, and that has led me in a weird limbo kind of thing. I would still love to be part of the free improv scene, and I think, I'm. But at the same time, I do think there is a need to understand improvisation in broader terms. That's why it is expanded improvisation, but connected to psychoanalysis, for example, dealing with the unconscious and, not only that, but, like the anxieties, the form of anxieties, then all these things, they become explicitly part of the process of improvisation, but not assuming that we come from a place of freedom or, possibility of expressing oneself, but, understanding our own conditioning and determinations, forms of determination, but improvising nevertheless, but kind of mobilizing those forms of negativity, or at least, trying to understand them and seeing, the objective not, just to produce some kind of aesthetic forms, but understanding how those aesthetic forms are part of a broader structures that reproduce the system that we're living in, so like trying to have this kind of the broadest possible perspective with the ambition of changing it. That's, and obviously this is quite ambitious, but I think that's what is required if we want to do something about the social dissonance, or like kind of abolish the current sense of social dissonance that it is so important, and so, and maybe other forms of dissonance can come, but at least we develop the structure collectively. That's why management of alienation, so to engage with the symptoms and consequences of social dissonance.
Cool. We also asked, like when we were reading about psychoanalysis, what were your thinkings on psychoanalysis? Especially if it could, I think Lucas asked if it could bridge the gap between like the extended, the from above and from below alienation.
I think this is something that I'm working on, and and by doing for the last 2 years and a half, Lacanian psychoanalysis is really been helpful, and starting to see many of the connections and understanding, but also in the history of anti-psychiatry, or or institutional psychotherapy, looking at François Tosquelles, seeing the connections. As somebody who was thinking, from a Marxist perspective, but also influenced by Lacan, applying into practice into the St. Alban psychiatric hospital. I don't know if you know François Tosquelles. Yeah, really interesting figure. Catalan, I guess, yeah, who was part of the POM, this kind of communist but non-Stalinist party in Spain, and then had to flee the Spanish Civil War. Ended up in a refugee camp in France, and then he got out. But he was working with the patients there and the prisoners, and then went to manage this psychiatric hospital in France, in Saint Alban, and it was similar, very similar to the concentration camp that he had experienced. And then he started to kind of, radically reorganize the whole hospital. So like trying to break away with what he called concentrationism, so like that people get isolated, that things are blocked, that there is no movement. So trying to open things up, train the nurses and other doctors that they were the ones that because it's like assuming that the society itself is sick, and it's like the nurses need to be educated, and then allowing the patients to move freely, to generate their own clubs, like a film club, like a do a newspaper, like a bar club, like a so giving them their own sense of agency and open things up. So this has been in the last years. I'm kind of looking at examples that connect so deeply to this project of social. So also the Socialistis Patienten Collective. I was just here with Jacobsen, who knows a lot about the history of psychiatry, and he has done his own project, Hospital for Self-Medication. So there is I'm learning from all these kind of radical practices that try to find ways, both theoretical but also practical to, because there is a very refined and sophisticated knowledge of dissonance, like more than dissonance, but different forms of pathologies, but also problematizing what pathologies are, so this is a big question, which is interesting because one of the interpreters in Documenta, Yanis Saris, was very heavy into Lacanian analysis, so he had a lot of insights while we were doing it, while performing also. He was so the Lacanian stop. I think he suggested the Lacanian stop, or so it came, some things kind of came into the interpretation of the score, but this is something to be developed. But I see the connections, very much so.
Yeah, like maybe a commentary, because I was thinking the same question as Lucca, because I think of the critique of social dissonance in relation to free improvisation is very interesting. I think we agree in a lot of ways with the critique. We kept thinking about this. So how you can think our practice, after this critique, how to? So do you have a conversation with Miguel Prado that is called we still believe in the power of. I was thinking, I think you already answer that, but because I was thinking if you still believe in the power of improvisation, this sound dimension. More
Yes,
like
absolutely. Yeah.
you know, and not your book, because we read like the texts about your book, and I think we have like some critical opinions about the text about your book. Like some texts was like reading the texts for us was like, oh, this person didn't get the idea of the social dissonance really. So I was thinking, like, what do you think about the reception of uh, by other people, the critics you receive? What do you think about this?
Yes, I do believe in the power of improvisation. Absolutely. With David Grundy, when we did this conversation with Lucia Capezza recently, and he said that improvisation had become a style, a musical style, and that form of improvisation certainly I don't find that interesting. It is just like a way in which musicians just kind of do this exploratory kind of thing, but already with certain sounds or ways of playing in mind. Certainly that's like the end of it. But in terms of doing it, I think it's unlimited. I mean, there is it's so rich. It has so much potential. This unskilled way of approaching activity and starting from whatever those kind of forms of practices are always going to uh, develop in different ways. Then how they get formalized, or the context, or the musical kind of business, or not business, or forms of distribution, or their meaning gets emptied out. Yeah, that's something to think about. I'm very tired, but just because of the last 2 weeks. But to do this for me is like, a dream. And when I had this possibility, thanks to JP, to come to Brazil, I mean, I'm so impressed with the reception, especially in Brazil. Like, wow, like that you have read all this, and you've been so thorough. It's for me like a dream scenario. Um, really special. And unfortunately, with the Spanish version, I mean, it was amazing to do the tour, but it did not. In Spain, for example, there's been like almost practically nothing. So it really depends on the context. And yeah, I mean, still, it's like a kind of worms that I have opened, and then now it's about dealing with the worms. So I see the problems with it. I saw the limitations. I see but I needed to do it, and I needed to go through, and I needed to find the ways, but understand the rudimentary qualities of it. But at the same time, it's quite up. It's difficult. It's like not. It's not. They're not easy themes, but I can see when I do the score, when I bring the conversations forward to the workshops, that it mobilizes people. It takes people. It does something. So I'm and yeah, I'm extremely thankful when I get a situation like this. This is really what I'm invested in, what I find necessary and important to do. But I guess, yeah, it needs to be practiced with the score, because the score also does something that you never get from reading. It really shakes things up, kind of thing. It's a kind of weird or problem. Yeah, it's a bit like opening a Pandora box where you don't know what you're going to get. Even though then at the end, you see connections and similarities.
Do you want to follow up, Lucas? Yeah, okay. Just something that maybe this question is a bit redundant and not so good, but it just came to me, and keeping in this direction of we are a bunch of improvisers who are still interested in improvisation and integrating this critique. I was just thinking, it seems to me that it's obviously not coincidental that this proposal came from free improvisation and from noise, right? It doesn't seem to me that, oh, okay, you had your practice, then you read Ray Brassier, and now you have this critique, but your practice could have been, I don't know, being a classical pianist or something. Like, it seems that there was something in free improvisation and noise that was already socially dissonant in a way, at least in potential, right?
Absolutely.
And it reminded me of another noise as device, right? Which seems to be always in this line already, even if it was if it was older than this text. So the question maybe to kind of move a bit forward in this problem of integrating this critique back into these practices was maybe what to you was what was already the potential social dissonance in these practices, even as they were before this critique, right? What of social dissonance was already present there that could be a way of bringing it back and turning into something more fleshed out, but from inside, right? From already the immanently to these practices, there was already something pointing to this direction, I think, at least in potential. So maybe this is a way of thinking the connection both ways, right? I don't know.
Well, I mean, for me, one of the most important examples is the scratch orchestra, and especially there's this moment in this documentary, The Journey to the North Pole. I don't know if you have seen it, but it's really amazing. It's in YouTube. I can send you the link if you want. It's really amazing, where you see the two groups. They are on the verge of disintegrating, so their political questions are to emerge. There is like what is called the ideological group, which they were closer to Maoism, and that's what Cornelius Cardew and John Tilbury and Kid Rowe, and then there is the more anarchistic side with the slippery merchants. So there, that tension is kind of there, oh, are we just doing something? And this kind of anarchistic, playful kind of things. But then the question, they were doing kind of at that time concerts with the stuff in their pockets, but then they will go into a strike, into a workers' strike, and they will ask themselves, how can we help these people with, the pocket concerts, that what does he do? It's like, it does not, so some of these discussions and tensions were already, they were differently articulated, but they've been there. And I think, the tension that AMM had also been going through at, points that were too versions of AMM. So yeah, I think there are many examples. You can think of Maggie Nichols and Social Virtuosity and the feminist improvisation group in which they were, kind of acting like scenes of being in the kitchen and like doing things that they will kind of bring the dissonance with the male perspective on improvisation. It's like so. I mean, so there's a radical kind of history that has incorporated, social dissonant elements, into they have been part of it. I think that, there is a very rich and I'm sure there must be, many, many more examples. But those are the ones that I'm more familiar with, maybe also, yeah. But there's, like, I guess there was many heated debates in the 2000s around improvisation, in the message boards or in different places. And yeah, there was a very, very active situation, Diego Tami was bringing, very dissonant ways of dealing with the free improvisation scene and, being meta or critical and playful and challenging, or Takunami, there were many, there have been, I guess those are the ones that are very close to me, or that, I felt there was like this affinity or felt part of a similar kind of discussion. I'm gonna have to leave. I hope it's okay that we stop.
It's more than okay. Our normal
Hey,
time
let's wrap it
till
up.
noon, so we're even beyond the normal time, so it's fine.
I mean, it's been really, really a total pleasure. I really enjoyed, and if ever you want to do it again or like do something, I'm totally up for
Great,
it.
Mattin.
This is I'm very thankful. This level of commitment with my work. I haven't seen it anywhere. Yes, yeah, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you for doing it, Mattin.
Well,
Okay.
we are very thankful
Yeah.
for you coming here. It was really nice.
So, what should I stop the
Okay,
recording?
yeah, thank you so much. Really, really
Bye, Mattin.
appreciate it, and we can get in touch.